Dobar večer. Hello. We decided to discuss all among us and with you. So, with my distinguished guests here, I think it's the best, just after maybe some formal questions, to you get into discussion if you want. If you don't, you don't need to. And also after, maybe you may say that it's better just to finish off and have an informal discussion around with you, because we all know, and it's quite strange, I think, situation being us on that side and you on the other side. But yeah, there are always sides, and so I will now introduce my dear guests, artists who are doing their art here on this space, and they are coming, I think, from quite same starting point, which is usually one that sound is important part, or at least one part of their artworks. And maybe I would like to start to raise a question to Brigitta Zics from UK, Hungary, so whatever, and or wherever. And you are presenting here your work, I Resonator, which has to do with, let's say, receptionary functions of the human brain, and then migrating to synapses all the signals and putting our, let's say, basic audio and visual information. So how much is the sound important in the work that...
Sound, yeah?
Yeah.
Sound is very important. Good question. You know, usually they say that in a movie, sound is what is really kind of creating the immersion, and I think in my work, in a way, that's true as well. I mean, I resonate with a rather kind of, is emerged from a concept of understanding the viewer itself from a perspective of simply from intrinsic reaction to things, and try to measure that intrinsic reaction and make it into an art. So the artwork is not the actual object itself, but the process and how we're going through that experience. And usually I'm referring to this as experiential art, because it's very much, you know, facilitating a very specific experience. And just going back to your question, sound is one part of the multisensory experience. We're almost cross-wiring different kind of senses. So in iResonator, for example, when you look at an image, you have obviously an accompanying sound to it, but it's also, you may feel on your skin that picture, because it's heating and cooling also linked to that experience. So particular imagery would, you know, trigger cold or hot on your skin. So it's very much, you know, expanding the experience that you have in everyday life, and really trying to put you in a scenario when you learn something about yourself.
Thanks. Bill, hello, welcome. What's the right pronunciation of your surname? Is Veen or Vine? Vine, okay. Bill Vine from UK Norfolk, also doing quite a variety of artworks, combining sound and video and interactive installations, and because you are somehow more as a musician or sound guy. So, what sound means for you in your artwork?
It's interesting because I did come from a point where kind of the music was the primary thing. But over the course of the past 10 years, I've moved more towards the kind of the relationship between sound and the kind of the visual element as well. So my work has gone from being purely based in the sound world through to this much more interactive multimedia experience. So I think I've arrived at a point now where I don't want to separate the two things. So the visual element is as important as the sound element. The sound element is as important as the visual element, and they don't fully reach their potential without the other. Certainly the work that I'm making anyway, because they're designed so that they are intrinsically linked. Yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment.
Great. And also you did the PhD, so what was the topic of PhD?
It was about composer-built instruments. So the focus was creating new sound-making devices that might not necessarily be recognized as such. So, for instance, the kind of the final piece that I created, I made some instruments out of repurposed cathode ray tube televisions. So I sort of took the Namjoon Pike kind of history and went from there and built these musical instruments out of TVs.
Thanks. And Brigitta, what was your PhD title?
Oh dear, that was about investigating a new
sound. Third part of the performance.
That's my answer. Is that, yeah, it's doing, okay. So I think it was about trying to understand what interactivity, technological interaction means in art and coming up kind of aesthetic definition for it. Yeah, I think that was it, but maybe not, I don't know. It was a long time.
Thank you. Cameron, as also a multi-talented artist, your occupation, how would you define? Is it music? Is it carpentry? Is it visuals? Is it something else?
Definitely music, of course. Music.
And you have a very special attitude to music by doing microtonal music. Can you just explain this to us, please? What is microtonal music? What is different to?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to kind of start in the negative.
Wherever you want.
We have. If you look at a piano, which I think is the worst instrument that there is, you have every piano the same. You have the 12 notes in the octave, and they're all equally spaced from each other. This, you know, if you go from C to C sharp, it's the same as F to F sharp, whatever. It's all homogenized according to quite recent mathematical system, and I'm one of these people who believes that this is very unmusical. It's very unsoulful, destructive thing that we have done to music is that we have reduced the infinity of sound to 12 equally spaced tones within the octave. And these have become fixed to the point where whenever you hear something on the radio, even the human voice is processed and resynthesized to perfectly match this system. And I'm one of these people who believes this is a terrible thing. That this is very, very unmusical.
Yeah. You also said, which is as a guitar player, like frets are like prison bars.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And Miha, you also deal with sound, but some last times that I heard you, it's you are quite like to manipulate noise. Would be that true or false?
I don't know. Maybe, yeah, if you just look at it and say what it is, yeah, it's noise in a way, but yeah, I like to think of myself as a composer, you know. This is written on my webpage, and I think that many people don't believe this. Sometimes even I don't. You do believe it, okay. But my way of thinking is like this, you know. I was trained in a classical music school and learned a lot about contemporary music as well when I studied, and a lot about technology, and electronic music is certainly a topic that I'm most familiar with. Yeah, I was very interested in progress. You know, what is the progress that we're making in composition? You know, it was quite obvious throughout history. You know, we all know all the breaking points: Renaissance, Baroque, classical music, romantic music, 20th century. There were plenty of things, electronic music, progress all the time. But I think I'm quite critical of you know, music that I hear that's supposed to be contemporary, about music that I make. You know, I'm not really very convinced that it's something that's really necessary or required. So basically, yeah, I don't know. What was the question? If I make noise? Yeah.
Yeah. if it's true or false.
Yeah, it's kind of true. Yeah, of course, on one level. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, I was dealing also a lot with technology, you know, developing technology. So at one point, I basically decided that maybe this makes a bit more sense, that I can understand it more than making musical compositions or making progress in music. So this is certainly, let's say, a moment in my life where I'm more occupied with developing technology, commercial products, and music is still sort of part of it, and I still think a lot about it, and I love to perform and come up with new concepts. But yeah, I have quite a diverse, manifold sort of character profile, let's say. Yeah. Sometimes I'm a composer, sometimes I'm an engineer, entrepreneur, curator, you know, whatever.
Thank you, but all what is somehow also connecting you is that you are doing, let's say, your own things, but I mean with hands. So like you build your devices, you do instruments, Cameron, and also you, Brigitta, did the mind cupola as an object. So how do you think that handwork is important to art?
It's me then?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So the materiality.
Well, obviously, even if it's immaterial, I guess it's a material. I'm guessing I'm going through different kind of processes, and at the moment, you know, there is this big trend of talking about materials anyway, in kind of different kind of, you know, philosophical terms, and also in terms of kind of technology, the smart materials and all of that. Working with something physical and tangible, I'm not sure that's, you know, important. Although I think it's more, I think I would formulate this in a way that, you know, making, not just physical making, but any kind of process is important, because that's how you can, you know, I believe a kind of thinking through making process. I think if you, for myself, obviously, if I just think about conceptual terms, and I don't necessarily believe in concept art, you know, I think for me, the process of actually going through something very simple, drawing or creating, is triggering new ideas, and I'm interested in those ideas rather than sit down at the beginning defining it very specifically and then do it. And I guess that's what you know, is important to me, even if I'm now exploring new technologies, like now, you know, after iResonator, I'm working now with, you know, just Cinema 4D and different kind of plugins for that. Trying to going beyond those technologies, what is being developed for, and try to really explore that inside out through making and through, you know, doing. That's very important part of what I'm doing, and I think that's, you know, defining the aesthetics as well. Well, I wouldn't say I'm a maker in that sense. You know, I'm not this kind of DIY maker, kind of cool kid on the block.
But still, let's say your objects, they have a function. They are not just like sculptures, you know, being somewhere, but they have, let's say, some interactivity built in themselves, and so on, so on. And Bill, so what let's say, kind of instruments did you do, and how would you describe, let's say, your composing structure?
I think that a lot of the reasons for the approaches that I've taken is that I've got a certain dissatisfaction with the sort of the traditional front-facing idea of an audience coming in and looking at an orchestra playing a piece. I find it very kind of passive, and it's a bit dictatorial. So the approach that I've taken is more that the objects, the instruments that I want to make and build and work with have something more about them that the public can actually directly engage with and actually, you know, kind of get their hands on. Not in a way that they're forced to, though, which I find, again, it's a bit, you know, it's uncomfortable. I've been to works where the work is entirely dependent on the audience, you know, physically getting their hands on things, and I think a lot of times people don't want to do that. You know, they want to experience it on their terms, but if it doesn't do anything without them, you know, making that leap, then they're going to feel uncomfortable. So it's finding that balance. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I want them to be more directly engaged than you are when you watch an orchestra, but I don't want them to feel uncomfortably forced into the engagement, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much.
Can I make a comment on that?
I wanted to ask you, yes, please.
One thing about this is that when you have like an interactive installation, I'm sure you've noticed this, if there are children, your problem is solved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids will go wild, which is brilliant, because they don't have all of the kind of the baggage that adults have built up over the years.
Can I make a comment on that? I think, is that on? Yeah. I think that's only if you think about interaction as a play element, and I think lots of times, you know, is a confusion around, and you know, some people think, oh, because the kids really love it, it's great, but I think, and that's what I really struggled with actually in my work, to go beyond. I mean, obviously play can be an aesthetic inquiry, but if it's just, you know, creating lovely patterns, you know. I really have an issue with that in terms of, I mean, I don't want to talk about, you know, what is art, what is not, but lots of times, you know, this kind of community of creative programmers, you know, who working with processing and open source, and it's all great and cool, and everybody jumping around, and in a V&A in London they had this exhibition, forgot the name, but it was all, you know, interactive art was defined as something where is responsive art, you know, and this is why I try to define something which is an aesthetic inquiry of interaction. So you're going beyond that kind of first layer of you know, interaction, and this is something deeper, you know, you use it for. And this is it's very difficult actually to do a good interactive piece, I guess.
Yeah. It's I think there's an element of trying to, like you say, get the balance, and interactivity doesn't necessarily mean physically getting your hands on something.
Yeah, and I guess is, yeah.
Miha, your instruments are also interactive, so what
means
interaction to you in that level? Yeah.
So yeah, my instruments are instruments. This is the same as any acoustic instruments. They are kind of interactive. They react towards a gesture of the player. So yeah, I build them because there is a necessity sometimes to build an interface, especially if you deal with electronic music. So this was my, you know, way of thinking about music, because music was the only domain that I was working with, and composition in particular. So when we get to electronic music, we have the problem that we can project more or less everything from a speaker, because this is just a piece of cardboard which you can make vibrate in any way, you know, imaginable. So the problem that I had with just creating electronic music with a computer and just, you know, letting it play was that, you know, people did not really recognize what was going on. So I thought that it might be very useful to have this connection between physical bodily action and the consequence that it triggers in sound, that these connections are made visible like it is the case with any acoustic musical instrument. Even if we only listen to it, we can sort of imagine how a guitar player looks like when he plays a complicated solo. So, you know, we are actually able to appreciate things like virtuosity, for example, which is kind of hard to do if you just have like abstract noises or sounds which are composed or just flying out of a computer. So this was my motivation behind building devices, interactive devices. Basically, there were instruments that would allow me to perform the music and make it very clear for the listener, the spectator, what I'm doing and how my actions just manifest themselves in sound. Yeah.
Thank you. Cameron, you're also making your own instruments. Can you please describe?
The instruments I make now, I make the, we had the workshop, of course, for these shakuhachi flutes. So I make the flutes out of bamboo. But I wanted to make a comment about Miha's instrument. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It has, it's like an array of little, they're like speakers, but they're putting out, you can't hear the sound they're putting out, but they put out like air pressure, yeah?
Ultrasound.
Ultrasound. And you push on the air to play it. It's fantastic, because the sound we listen to is air and movement, and the control of the instrument is also movement of air. Very nice.
I can maybe explain if we're already here. This is one of the instruments that I developed, and one of the things that I was interested in my work when developing electronic musical instruments, because they often lack tactile feedback. Or, for example, if you take a look at the first electronic music instrument, the theremin, it's like a free, hands-free musical instrument. So you don't get the experience that you get when you play acoustic musical instrument where you have an immediate tactile feedback, let's say. So I was trying to develop this instrument that creates contact-free tactile feedback. So in a way, like a theremin, so it's still open air, but that you could actually feel something. But then I was using ultrasound in order to like create a very dense point of acoustic energy in space, which is very localized. So you can actually then feel this sound vibrating in this point where all this energy meets the idea was to create something that would allow you to mold the sound, to interact directly with the sound in, with the sound itself, in the medium of sound. So it's quite fun, but it's just fun for me, because I'm performing it. So no one really knows what's going on there.
So dear guests, thank you very much. So this question?
One question. I'm not really good with this music sounds and everything, but I would like to ask Miha, because in 214 you were like together, not together, but before you was playing Miha Kralj, and he, like 20 years ago, he used these synthesizers, which was also for him like a space music, and it was very successful, but he didn't doing anymore this. So it was like 20 years or 30 almost, the difference between his music as a synthesizer and then after you have a performance with this new, how to say, electronic music. So what do you think about this connection? Because I invite you two together to show this, what he made before 30 years and what you make now, which is like for the people was the same, I think. Something new.
So you think it was new, okay.
New in that time for him, but new in this time for you, and he need like 20 years that he became noticed in our place.
So
what do you think about, to explain a little about this?
I don't know, this is a complex thing, we could look at it from very different perspectives. So I started my presentation by pointing out that, what is progress in music? How do we see it? How do we recognize it? What can we do new today that wasn't done before? So in a way, if you just stood there at the concert and listened to the sounds, they were a bit different, but more or less they were just sounds, coming at different times, in different frequency constellations, like, I don't know, modernistic painting, But this, where is the progress? We have, the same situation that Miha Kralj had like 20 years ago when there was new technology, there were new synthesizers coming out, so we needed to experiment with the new technology, because it allows us, it enables us new ways of expressing ourselves, and this shit is still going on, the technology keeps on developing and we're, constantly experimenting with technology because it allows us, new ways of expression. But then I think music is this particular domain, field where we just did not go beyond, experimenting with technologies and structures, abstract structures. We never did much of a, conceptual turn like all visual arts did. So more or less, Miha Kralj was experimenting with technology, I'm experimenting with technology, but we don't have anything to say, basically.
No,
this is a big
just
problem.
The point of view, yes. So it's still the same, the histories repeat, and we are...
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to say you're thinking about... Sorry.
Why you have nothing to say? Why do you think you have nothing to say?
I do have, but I think, this is the problem, because I decided that I will be a composer, And music is this particular language which is much more difficult to generate meaning through music. Okay, we have text, and, we can say whatever, but it's not really music, So I think it's a problem in language, in music, because visual arts is much more clear. You take a picture of whatever, and you can immediately attach meaning to it. But in music, we have a piano, the abstract tones, and we have technology that creates, synthesizes sounds. I know a couple of examples, but this is something that is frustrating me because I can, count them on my hand, you know, of like very interesting musical compositions. And then many composers will say, oh, come on, these are not musical compositions. Yeah.
But in a way, this is just rhetoric, you know, how you define, you know, in terms of how you define music and how you define noise, and is that rhetoric important? I mean, I'm guessing what I'm trying to understand, because in even in visual sense, it's not easy to, well, you know, attach meaning. Anybody can attach to anything. Well, I guess, you know, everything obviously has a meaning straight away. I think even music, you know, but I guess is we're talking about something else. I don't know what we're talking about anymore. But anyway, I think the main point for me is just capturing, because it's almost like you're aspiring to achieve something in the terms of music, which is old-fashioned and doesn't, you know, in terms of like Bach, or, you know, or do we have to redefine what music is, and in that terms you actually achieved something rather, you know, interesting. I don't know. It just came to my mind.
I don't know. I just think we need to, you know, constantly think about what can we, how can we make progress? Why is something that we make contemporary? You know, why is it justified that it's being called contemporary? Does it have a relation to here and now? And not just in terms of, you know, using the latest computer and the smallest, I don't know what, and technology, but, you know, and it is, of course, it's possible, but it's just good to be alert, because, and question, you know, stuff that you're doing, and find good reasons to make something.
Yeah, I think we are so contemporary because we are here and now. So that's why art is contemporary. And Bill, if you have some last sentence just before we put you to the wall and shoot you.
Just go ahead and put me to the wall and
Brexit,
shoot me. I think it's
fine.
fine.
Brexit performance.
Yeah. I was not responsible for Brexit.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Now you all can go for half an hour, because I will translate this into Slovenian.
Can I also congratulate you that you have the first lady, Slovenian first lady? I think we should celebrate that. But save USA. Thank you.
We have the first son-in-law.
Hasta la victoria siempre. Oh no, sorry. And like you, Brigitta, said, you think you have nothing to say. I would add, I don't think, and I have a lot to say. I would like to thank you very much, and invite you just now for a free and whatever you like, and just to say that Miha is performing tomorrow with Robertina Šebjanić in their space, and Brigitta has the opening of her installation I Resonator, and whoever wants to know more about it, please to ask Brigitta to explain. She will do it. Yeah. Thank you very much. Hvala lepa.